Guillermo del Toro and Ron Perlman were the main factors behind the original two Hellboy films from the early 2000s. And although they weren't exactly faithful to the source material, they were received well by casual and serious audiences. Both features were considered to be moderate successes in terms of revenue on the overall scope for films that had later become the definitive interpretation of Hellboy, but the speculative scenario is this: the unavoidable disaster that was Hellboy 2019. When writer Mike Mignola created Hellboy in the early 1990s, the character was creator-owned, so he maintained a majority of control in the publishing or depiction and even film-based adaptations of his work. Consensus had it that his livelihood were mostly from royalties generated by the Hellboy work of his. This executive control by Mike Mignola would later be interpreted as a hindrance to the character's depictions in various media. The original two films were the creative vision of director Guillermo del Toro and actor Ron Perlman. Through the circumstances and situations, the 2004 film, which was loosely based on the Seed of Destruction story, was pitched to various studios unsuccessfully, until Columbia Pictures on Revolution Studios became associated to it. The films were considered a unique interpretation of the character, and Ron Perlman was specifically sought for the role of Hellboy. He later considered the part to be one of the defining acting choices of his life, and the role made him an internationally known actor in the early 2000s. Expectations for the film were minimal, and when it was released, the acclaim and praise for it were more than what anyone had expected. With the success of Hellboy, a sequel was soon implemented, and the original plan for the sequel was to adapt the Almost Colossus story. However, the concept was quickly changed because the adaptation was having problems during production. As a result of the occultism from the 2004 film on casual opinions of Hellboy, Mike Mignola began to write more mythology-based stories for Hellboy, and Guillermo del Toro was in the production phase of the 2006 film Pan's Labyrinth. As a result, a completely original story was conceived of, which was the Golden Army. The second film was reacted to much more favorably than the first. After the success of the Golden Army, there were initially plans for a third film to complete the Del Toro and Perlman adaptation of Hellboy. Guillermo del Toro had ideas for a third film during the implementation of the Golden Army, but was associated with the Hobbit film project of the time, so the third Hellboy film wasn't exactly a priority for him. As a result of the Make-A-Wish Foundation, Ron Perlman dressed as Hellboy to fulfill a child's request, and as a result of this request, Perlman and del Toro became interested in the third film once more, despite not getting permission from Mike Mignola, nor having a film studio to finance or produce the said feature. Unconfirmed sources had it that throughout the 2010s, development of the third film sustained substantial problems, due in part to Mike Mignola's fears of Guillermo del Toro and Ron Perlman, or even studios somehow taking the film right adaptations to Hellboy. When asked about the third Hellboy film, Mike Mignola remarked that he had refused to allow a third film to be made. His fears of the rights being taken from him extended to the comics, where he revealed that ideas were even suggested for the third film to be depicted in a comic, which were later denied out of fears by Mike Mignola that casual readers or audiences might confuse the adaptations of Hellboy from the films to the comics. Eventually, as a result of various circumstances, the third film was never realized. During the late 2010s, development of the third film continued, with it being a clear ending to the trilogy as mentioned, but from information now known, control over the project was removed from Guillermo del Toro, and Ron Perlman refused to be associated with the feature if Guillermo del Toro wasn't the director, so the third film became that of the first reboot to the Hellboy franchise. Mike Mignola had written early drafts of the film's screenplay to exercise executive control, but it eventually became more dark and graphic, in a stark contrast to the more comical and even adventurous depictions by del Toro and Perlman. Supposedly, Mike Mignola preferred this in hopes that film audiences might differentiate the said reboot from Guillermo del Toro and Ron Perlman's influences with the Hellboy film concept. From information now known, various details about the 2019 film were nearly opposite intentionally from the 2004 and 2008 features. There were various examples of individuals associated with the project all vying for majority control or influence, and there were leaked reports of excessive toxicity and even threats from those associated with the project. Arguably, the only positive aspect of the feature was the performance of David Harbour as Hellboy. The actor mentioned that there was an extraordinary extraordinary amount of toxicity related to the film, despite being the director of the film. Neil Marshall claimed to have nothing to do with it and how it failed in such a spectacular way. Further discussions also highlighted that Mike Mignola was more active in the film's production out of fears that his influence with the adaptation of Hellboy might almost be removed once more in a similar aspect to the Ron Perlman and Guillermo del Toro features. So there were clear instances where he voiced approval or dissatisfaction with aspects of the feature, which also contributed to the chaos during the film's production. After everything known or unknown about the 2019 failed reboot of the Hellboy film franchise, it was later considered to be one of the worst superhero-themed features of the late 2010s.